The following is a conversation between myself and WNBF pro Brett Freeman. That is my best impersonation of the Lex Friedman podcast. Brett is a two-time WNBF pro world champion. He most recently won his class at the 2019 World Championships in New York, where I had the opportunity to sit and chat with Brett, where I'd also competed as an amateur. Brett is a really cool and down-to-earth guy and a great natural bodybuilder. We had a conversation all about his journey to the stage from when he first began as an 18-year-old up to his last contest prep in 2019. We also spoke about his time off from the stage, his multiple contest preps, what he's done differently, and also how he approached his off season and his most recent contest prep. Sit back and enjoy, or go for a walk and enjoy this podcast, whatever you do when you listen to podcasts. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to myself or Brett. Our social media handles are down in the show notes. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do leave a rating and review. And as always, if you want to find out more about coaching with myself, you can check that in the show notes or go to healthmastery.co. So without further ado, let's get into this podcast with Brett Freeman. Brett, my man, good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know we were supposed to do this, or we did do this probably 11 months ago, and I kind of cocked up a little bit on the technical side. I don't actually know what happened, but there was some sort of lag where it just wasn't audible at all whatsoever. So appreciate you coming back on, man.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure, actually. But thank you again for having me.
You probably have a little bit more energy. Actually, both of us probably have a little bit more energy since the last time. It was about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks after the WNBF Worlds. And we both had fairly long seasons. And I think we're just a little bit more fed. You don't actually look like you have that much more body weight in your face. I certainly do.
I take that as a compliment. That's usually where the body fat first, so winning.
Yeah, I actually noticed for me that my body fat, or at least after the show, I did look like I had a really puffy face, and then it kind of normalized and my body weight didn't really change, but people thought I was getting leaner, but actually just I guess my hormones are balancing a little bit more, and I just had better body fat distribution, back a normal body fat distribution compared to just like a big hamster face. Do you get that as well?
Yeah, every season. But this 2019 season is a little more even, I would say. Whereas previous seasons, it all went to the midsection. This time, distributed about evenly.
Yeah, it's interesting how body fat distribution can change. I remember my legs used to never be like that lean ever. And this season, it seemed like after this or last contest season, my legs stayed a bit leaner, and they kind of have stayed leaner the whole time, than the rest of my body. Not that it makes any difference. It's all got to come off anyway, but it's just interesting how that can change.
No, definitely. And I was polar opposite. Legs were lean, midsection looked 60 weeks out.
So Brett, I wanted to chat a little bit today about how how you kind of got into bodybuilding. I know when I first started following bodybuilding or start reading about it online, and I talked to Alberto about this as well, was on the bodybuilding.com forums. And I know that you were kind of, I don't know if you posted on the forums or you just kind of appeared in some logs, but I do remember I think you have the same handle, or you did have the same handle as you do for Instagram, right?
I do, yes. Yep.
So tell me, how did you get into bodybuilding then? And when did you get into bodybuilding?
Oh man, so I believe it was around my sophomore year in high school. I was playing football, and the coaches always had us weight train after practice. And I was one of the weakest kids on that team. So I started to research how to get stronger, and I just so happened to stumble upon the bodybuilding.com forums. This was around 2007. I started to research, educate myself on how to properly lift back then. And then I just started to track my workouts on the forums. And then I ended up kind of switching gears around 2008 to more bodybuilding, powerlifting style training. And that was when I believe I made a log in the contest prep section on bodybuilding.com. And Brad Loomis actually was one of the first 3DM coaches that found my workout log. And then he ended up getting Berto, Eric, and Todd, who used to be a family friend, still is a family friend of Berto, Eric, and Brad. And they started watching my progress around 2008. And then I remember training legs one night at a gym down the street from my house, and I saw a poster hanging up on the wall as I was exiting. And I ripped it off, took it home, went to the bodybuilding.com forums, typed in the question, like, do you guys think this is a good idea? I'm 18, never competed before. How would I do? Am I going to embarrass myself? And then I ended up getting a PM, which is a private personal message back then, from Father Flex. And he asked if he could, join in on the journey, and it would be pro bono. And it was history from then on.
So Father Flex is Alberto Nunez, who's probably like not that much older than you. For anybody listening, it just sounds a little bit kind of strange. Father Flex just sounds like Father Christmas just PM'd you.
I know. Seriously, right? And that was back when Berto was dieting under Lane Norton, and he was pushing the conditioning to levels that we have not seen before. And as a teenager, I'm like, holy, like, that's realistic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like Dr. Joe was Lane Norton's coach originally, and then Lane started to coach Alberto. I'm not sure if he coached Eric, but he coached Paul Ravella as well, and then they started coaching people. It's like you can trace it back almost like ancestrally to like Dr. Joe.
No, definitely. It's like crazy when you think about the family tree and how it almost all starts at Dr. Joe, who I believe was one of the first coaches to start online training.
Yeah, I think he was. And as far as I can remember from reading back, he was, I'm not sure if he was still doing a lot of coaching. I know he does still do a little bit of coaching, but I don't know. I think he was kind of finishing up his coaching and moving into like more education at that stage. Lane Norton was really big when I started reading about bodybuilding. I think that might have been around 2009, maybe earlier than that, 2008. I don't know, a long time ago at this stage. So after you competed in that for a show, or did you compete in that for a show?
I did, yes. I competed as a bantamweight, a teen, and got whooped in the overall.
So was that a WNBF show? I'm sure it was called something else back then, but was it associated with that, or what kind of organization? Was it a drug-tested show?
It was a natural drug-tested organization. At the time, it was a USBF show, which was an affiliate with the OCB.
Okay.
The following year, it ended up changing over to the OCB.
And how many shows have you done since then, or was that kind of the initial? Was that the kind of an initial ignition for your bodybuilding career? Did you fall in love with it after you did that, or what made you want to kind of do more?
No, that was definitely the itch. Just the entire contest prep process. It was that was the seller for me. And after that, I ended up competing in 2011. As far as how many shows, I believe I've done around 12 in total.
Is that 12 shows across how many seasons? Like, how many competitive seasons have you done?
4 total competitive seasons, 2009, 2011, a failed contest prep in 2013, and then I returned in 2017 and 2019.
So 2017 and 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, they were your like pro seasons, right? So tell us a little bit about your kind of season where you won your pro card, and then what happened with that failed contest season.
Uh, I'll start with 2013 first. 2013, I kind of had quite a bit of momentum going from the previous off seasons. Strength was at an all-time high. Tissue gain was at an all-time high. And I ended up hiring Matt Jan, who, in my opinion, is a great coach. He is currently one of the top IFBB coaches currently. And which he coached kind of influenced how I coached later down in life. But the main reason why it was a failed contest prep is I had too many things going on. I was going to school full time, working 2 jobs, trying to get a relationship going, who is my wife currently now. So in hindsight, I don't regret stopping that contest prep. And then in 2017, after 6 years removed from the stage, I had 2 years in a row off from around 2014 to 2016. Didn't really train too much, maybe 1 to 2 times per week. Nutrition was entirely off. So from 2016 to 2017, I was basically trying to regain the lost strength and tissue that I potentially had lost during that time. And my 2017 prep was all intuitive. It was kind of like a roll of the dice, like let's see how I can do. If I can still stack up, if I can still present a physique that is halfway decent and not embarrassing. And so I dieted. I would say I recomped from January to around April-ish. And then I didn't really start putting myself into a deficit until around May, June-ish, where I had the INBF Natural Mania as the main target, which was a show that I last competed at in 2011, where I was completely embarrassed. So I wanted to return to that show as a bantamweight, hopefully improved, and see if I can place within that top 5 again.
And how did you do at that season?
I won the bantamweight class at the 2017 Natural Mania and ended up winning the overall.
And then you won your pro card, right? Is that how you won your pro card?
Yeah, a recipient of the pro card. Now, it used to be that the Natural Mania used to be a super pro qualifier. So if the class had more than, I believe, 8 competitors, the winner of that weight class received their WNBF pro card.
Okay. And why was it that you were like worried about embarrassing yourself that season? What was your like off season like before that? Where you like, how did you recomp? Obviously, as a natural, it's not something that usually happens unless you're detrained. Did you take time off from the gym, or were you focusing on other stuff?
Yeah, I started to prioritize life. I was mentally burnt out from 2011. 2011 was a huge toll. My father had passed while I was contest prepping, so I still pushed through that. In hindsight, stupid idea. And then from my prep in 2013, I kind of fell out of love with the process because I was gunning for a pro card all up in my head, as opposed to actually enjoying the nature of, bodybuilding. And so from 2014 to 2016, I started to prioritize things outside of bodybuilding, put it on the back burner. And it just so happened that I stopped training.
And so in that 2017 season, when you were kind of just getting back into bodybuilding style training and recommitting yourself, do you feel that you made a lot of progress from the previous season, or do you think it was just kind of showing up at the right time? And did that kind of deload, I suppose, mental deload or physical deload even across those couple of years, did it provide any benefit to your physique?
I think when I compare how I looked in 2013 to 2017, there was a marginal amount of improvement. I think it was mainly just regaining the lost tissue that I did have and just presenting it with, muscle maturity to a certain extent. So maybe a bit more refined 2013 version that I brought in 2017. And I always think it's a draw when you do compete. It all depends who shows up.
Yeah. That's the thing about bodybuilding. It could be anybody who shows up on the day, and if someone's not there, a different person will win. Kind of like the Olympia last year, right, with Brandon Curry. Like in a hard year,
Yeah.
he would be lucky to crack top 5, I'd say. But so yeah, how did your 2017 season compare to your last season? I guess your 2019 season was a pretty successful. I don't know, maybe the most successful season for you. You did fairly well in terms of placements, and obviously you brought a crazy look to the stage. You're probably the most or the leanest person at the WNBF World, which is a huge accolade. It's not an award, but it's from visual perspective, you probably were one of the leanest.
Thank you. I think Brandon Kemper deserves that award, but
he was very lean as well.
But in regards to 2019 and 2017, I approached them very similar, although 2019 a bit more extreme because I felt as if I had a target on my back, so to say. And I feel as if I left a lot on the table in 2017 because, to be honest with you, I'm not so sure about my world title in 2017. Just being a fan of the sport and being very, very, very critical and self-aware, I'm not so sure I may have deserved that win, but apples and oranges, I suppose. So in 2019, I wanted to take I still took a very passive approach in regards to prioritizing things outside of life. So family came first, work came first, and then it was, the bodybuilding side hobby.
So like what with regards to say your body weight and how you looked in 2017, 2019, actually, I don't think I've seen pictures from you from 2017, but did you have an improved physique or what changed from the actual outcome from both preps?
Improved physique, definitely, I would say. In regards to actual stage weight, I was lighter in 2019, but a bit more muscle tissue. 2017, I competed. I believe I weighed in at 146 or 147. And then for 2019 Worlds, I was around 143, 144, but with much improved conditioning.
So did you compete in different classes in 2017, 2019, different weight classes?
Yes, in 2017, I competed in the bantamweight class, and then my first pro shows tend to not have weight classes due to the amount of competitors. And then at 2017 Worlds, they lumped all the bantamweights and lightweights together. So there was around 20 to 30 lightweight and bantamweights all up on stage. And then 2019, my first pro show of that year was one weight class. So I had to go up against Jeff Alberts, Sam Makanala. And then my second pro show of 2019, again, no weight classes. I ended up having to go against Garino Mackey, who is a world-class athlete. But then 2019, as you know, WNBF Worlds didn't really tell us if there were going to be a bantamweight, lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight class until the night of.
Okay, it was strange. It's strange the way they kind of did that in 2017, where they just lumped them all together with like 30 competitors. You think if they had like even 8 in a class, they would make it their own class. But you obviously beat everybody. So it seems like then between 2017 and 2019, you obviously had a fairly productive off season, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I kind of contribute that to not attempting to reverse and stay too lean post show and taking more of a recovery diet approach.
Mm. So what exactly did you do? If you competed at, say, 147, or 145, how much over your body weight or your stage weight did you get?
Within the first 2 weeks, I put on around, so I came right back up to around 155 to 160.
Mm.
And then from there on, I slowly trickled my way upwards.
Yeah, so you felt that was obviously, if you gained some significant tissue in those 2 years, you found that was obviously beneficial for you. How did your training or training or diet in general approach to those two change from your, say, 2013 to 2017? Obviously, you weren't as lackadaisical, or maybe that's not the correct word, but your focus is maybe more on bodybuilding. How did it change?
Oh, changed big time. So pre-17, I was pro if it fits your macros, which in hindsight, terrible approach to take. So it was always weighing Pop-Tarts. And then I trained in more of a powerlifting fashion. So I never trained with reps below, I would say, 6. And then after the 2017 season, where I started to educate myself on actual proper, meal timing and meal composition and how it actually impacts and influences training performance and just how it visually affects us, I brought that over into my 2018 off season and then into my 2019 season, where I took much more of your typical bodybuilding approach, kind of backed off a little bit on the powerlifting.
That's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting to see kind of the two camps of people. I don't know if it's that big anymore, but if it fits your macros, and obviously, calories in and calories out is not a style of dieting. It's just, it's just an underlying kind of physiological thing. But when you talk about if it fits your macros, I understand what you're saying in terms of you just probably ate like a child most of the time.
Oh yeah, it was, oh, look at these. I can eat these
Yeah.
Lucky Charms and almost get shredded glutes, but then I'm deficient in micronutrients. So
Yeah. It is interesting, like how much like different properties in like plants and other foods that we probably don't even really know that much about can affect our affect our performance, how we feel. And these things do show up when you're looking at like genomic testing, transcriptomics, and all of these things like proteomics. When they do tests on our urine and everything, you can see traces of the or elements of the food properties that you've had. And often bodybuilders kind of overlook that. And I think it's important to have a kind of a married approach where you're not doing the very like bro style where all you're eating is chicken, broccoli, and rice, and then doing super huge cheat meals, but at the same time not going the complete opposite direction and eating Cocoa Pops for breakfast and post training and jelly babies and things like that all the time. It's more of a flexible kind of meal plan rather than but focusing on good quality food most of the time. I think that's the approach that I like to take, because I still do enjoy eating my junk from time to time.
oh no, definitely. And I think it needs to be something that's somewhat healthy and then sustainable in the long term, but not too restrictive to the point that it causes you to either want to binge or overeat.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with like trying to eat too perfect, is just not the fact that that's actually a problem. It's just the fact that it can cause you to just binge, and that does become a problem.
No, big time.
So then tell me, for your 2019 season, You said that you had a much improved physique as well in terms of just your conditioning. What changed there in terms of even from the previous prep? That was like, I know your off season didn't change, but how did your approach differ, or was it that you just dieted for longer to get leaner?
I think I started off 2019 with a bit more momentum in regards to where I was able to build up calories in total along with strength, possibly regained or added a bit more tissue. And then in regards to the actual length of the contest prep, I was a lot more strategic in how I conducted it. So I didn't gun it linearly. I implemented tons of refeeds, tons of diet breaks, just to maximize and ensure that I wasn't losing any training performance while in the gym. And then also not running myself too flat for too many consecutive weeks.
So how much was your body weight above your stage weight of 142 when you actually began the prep?
37 pounds. So I started 2019 around 180, 182.
That's actually a decent amount for somebody who competes at 142. Like, yeah, I think I started my prep at maybe 205 and ended up 175. But I'm 5'11", you know, so like I'm not sure what height you are, but you're smaller than I am. But obviously you've got a lighter stage weight because you're shorter as well. So is that an approach that you felt benefited you? Do you think that you need to get that heavy, or was it just you did get that heavy from having a long off season, or would you change that in the future?
It was a mixture of both. I had a preconceived thought that it might be beneficial just due to being able to recover better, handle more possible load in the gym. But looking back on it, it just due to the actual length of the diet, I do believe I may have lost a bit of tissue on the way down. And it only made prep more long, to be honest.
Yeah. And I know you said, like, just before we talked about, just before we went on air, that you don't like the term like suffer. But obviously the prep does get difficult when you're getting very, very lean. And have you found that over the years or over the preps you've been able to kind of endure lower calorie diets and fatigue better than you were in the past? Is that is that attributable to your ability to get lean? Because obviously when you're getting super lean, a lot of that's mental, right?
It's all mental, in all honesty. And I dislike the term suffering, but I think it's being able to actually deal and be okay with being hungry and just dealing with the negative side effects that do come with prolonged deficits. Now, every single season, I wasn't perfect. Like in my 2019 season, I didn't have too many negative side effects, but in 2009, I ended up having a terrible relationship with food, tons of food focus, lethargy, poor sleep, and body image issues or body dysmorphia. 2011, some of the side effects went away, but still, I mean, poor sleep, et cetera, et cetera. 2017 is where prep started getting a bit more manageable and easier, where sleep was the only thing that started to be an issue. 2019, yet again, sleep was the only issue. But then pushing for that extra bit of conditioning, there was a bit of, disruption in, actual overall mood, well-being, a little bit more irritability, but nothing that couldn't be managed because in the moment I'm doing this to myself. So there's no reason to be an a-hole to those around me.
Yeah, I completely agree. It does get easier the more often you prep. I've had 3 seasons actually. And funny enough, you mentioned in 2013 you were working with Matt Jansen, and I think I might have mentioned this last year. I actually worked with him my first prep as well, 2013. I was
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was 21, and I did like men's fitness, that kind of thing where you dance around the stage in these little kind of European shorts that are like painted onto you. Yeah, I won't be doing that again. But that's what I did. Yeah, 21, and I found that that was definitely my hardest prep, and it was my first, but also the hardest mentally. And 2016 was a little bit harder. Like I had some issues like binging, from time to time. 2016, 2019 then got easier again. But I think some of the physiological things are just never going to go away, right? If you're just shredded and you're in a like massive energy deficit and you're sub 10% body fat, you're just gonna feel like you have this relative energy deficiency. So you're not gonna function properly. So what are your kind of thoughts then for like newer competitors, or I know you work with some competitors as well. Do you think that it's just like a rite of passage where like you're not going to get as lean, or it's going to be harder when you do the first shows? Or do you think like I've never ever seen anybody shredded it that's like their very first show, or maybe it's like a needle in a haystack. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man. I think with the amount of research that we have now, just the amount of information, good information that we do have now, I do believe hitting that peak of condition is definitely doable for first-time competitors, but just the psychological burden that it does put upon them, maybe not taking it to such extremes, just so they don't have a poor taste in their mouth with the aftermath of what it does entail.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the element, I think, of the first of perhaps not being your absolute best, like physically from a first go around, is probably, in my opinion, is not being able, is not having experienced something as difficult for such a prolonged period of time. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's some sort of awful thing. I mean, obviously it's not too bad if we're going back and doing it every couple of years, but it is difficult. And if you haven't experienced something physically or mentally as persistent and just almost like an annoyance, it can be hard to deal with. And you really do need to be able to like control your emotions when you feel like pissed off, like you mentioned there. You've got better at doing that, or you're hungry like constantly and you're a bit stressed. Like most people will stress eat, or like especially if you're like really lean. And just the ability to kind of delay gratification, I think, just gets better as you get more experience doing this. And that's why like it almost gets more enjoyable the longer you do it, because you're able to kind of you've experienced what it's like, and that it's not going to get any worse, or that like this is as bad as it can get, and I can deal with this. It's just a little bit of hunger, and you're able to reframe things as well in your mind, like hunger and mood, and kind of focus a bit more on like you said, you're doing this to yourself. It's not like you're being forcefully starved.
No, definitely. And I kind of like to relate it to maybe an RPG video game, where after every single season or time that you do either diet down or go into an improvement season, that you do tend to level up over time, and it just becomes a little bit easier to manage the longer you do it.
I've never heard of RPG. What is that?
Role-playing game.
Oh. All right. Oh, like Call of Duty or something like that.
A little bit more nerdier than that.
Oh, like that movie Role Models, where like the guy who's McLovin like uses the sword.
Yes, LARPing.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I've never done LARPing before, but it's some sort of video game LARPing. Is that what it is?
Yes, I believe LARPing is. I believe LARPing is when they actually do it in person.
Yeah, yeah. I've never. See, I was going to get Christmas is coming up. I was going to get it like try get the new Xbox or PlayStation, even though they're all both sold out. But I try not to, because I'll just play it all the time. So I've never really I mean, there's one at my parents' house, but I try not to buy them, because I'll just waste way too much time just getting down a rabbit hole of spending hours and hours in video games.
Yeah, I did that during quarantine for 2 weeks. I went down the Dark Souls franchise rabbit hole, and it was torturous.
So based off of your experience then from the last few preps, what are you doing this prep? I mean, do you even have access to a gym anymore? I mean, this off season, do you have access to a gym, or what's your kind of situation at the moment?
So when lockdown did occur, we were pretty much locked down for around 4 months without the gym. The gyms opened up, I want to say maybe 2, 3 months ago. So I ended up using, just like everybody else, I ended up having a pair of dumbbells, used those, ended up stopping training because it just wasn't doing it for me at that time. But then I ended up kind of piecing together my own home gym in my basement. Gyms did open back up, but just due to the numbers rising, my wife's immune system being a bit more compromised, I decided just to mainly focus at home.
And is that what you're doing still? Like, if gyms open back up, I guess the situation is still pretty bad in the US, right?
Yeah, the situation's pretty. It's very nonlinear, but in New York, the cases they spike here and there. But I'm still training at home, Jeff Albert's style.
Yeah, I was actually looking at his. He made a video the other day on his home gym. That's exactly what I want to do. Is create a home gym with like a proper home gym, not like a set of York dumbbells or whatever, or these like cheap plastic ones. But yeah, because it just gets really annoying when you have to stop starting. I was making really good progress after the first lockdown here, and then they locked it down again. So it's pretty demotivating when that. So I just want to get like a home gym. I mean, I can't put one in where I live now, but eventually I want to get like a decent home gym and just not worry about it and just train by myself. That would be the ideal situation. So what would your kind of thoughts about being like your next prep? Do you have any idea of when you'll be prepping again?
I did get the thumbs up from the wife that I could compete in 2021. We planned on starting our own family, but due to everything that's currently going on, we're postponing that until afterwards. So 2022. So 2021 is looking a bit optimistic, but I'm not 100% positive as of yet, just due to COVID and if shows could potentially be postponed. After witnessing so many shows and clients have to go through, the hurdles to actually get on stage, that's a variable that I kind of don't want to deal with.
Yeah, I guess that's another really difficult thing to deal with is prepping at home. I don't know what kind of equipment you have, but I know that there's only one natural show here in Ireland, and when the gym's closed, I guess people just pulled out of the show because there's no you can't really effectively train. I mean, you can, but I mean, you can probably train more effectively in the gym, right? You've got equipment there and everything like that. So I understand people pulling out of shows that they've only got a pair of, 2 10-pound dumbbells or 5-kilo dumbbells at home. You're not going to really be able to prep that well. Would that be an impact for you or a factor, I should say, in your ability to prep, or do you have like pretty decent equipment?
I have decent equipment for off-season purposes, but I do know if I were to prep due to leverages, I do think commercial gym equipment would come in handy.
Yeah, it's the exact conversation I had with the client the other day, who trains like in a kind of a basement kind of gym. But I said, like, when you get into prep, you're probably going to want to use things like hack squats and Smith machines, back squatting all the time, or just, doing heavy barbell stuff when you're really lean. It's just going to be very, very fatiguing. It's not that it's impossible at all. I mean, I know there's some pros who, I can't remember the guy's name. He's like a bald guy. He's a pro, WNBF pro middleweight. He just trains.
Levi Burge.
Yeah, he just trains in his like basement or something like that, right? And he's like a good pro. So it's definitely possible. It's just easier, right?
Yeah, it's definitely possible, but again, it is easier.
Yeah. So, so yeah, what would your goals be then? I guess is that something that like you like? I know before you were gunning for your pro card initially. Your first show you wanted to win, then you want to get your pro card, then you want to get worlds, then you want the redemption because you didn't feel like you'd actually done it. What's next? Is it to put on 10 pounds of muscle, move into the middleweights or the lightweights, and win? The middleweight class. What's your driver?
Oh man, my driver is to get my arms to the point where they're actually complemented instead of my legs or my conditioning. So
So what are
in
you doing
regards to
for?
actual, sorry. Currently for arms, I'm just specialization.
Is it just like putting them early in the workout or hitting them more frequently? Like what are you doing specifically? And was that kind of like tongue in cheek, or is that actually your goal? Is just to bring bigger arms? It's like if nobody compliments you, then it's just a failed prep.
It's a bit self-deprecating and tongue-in-cheek, but I am specialized. I've always been specializing and emphasizing the upper body, so I have been toying around with a bit of more frequency, increasing volume weekly, and just actually emphasizing and placing them first within sessions as opposed to training them last after either like a back day or a lower day.
Yeah, and do you plan to stay within that weight class, or do you have any ambitions of moving up to a weight class? Do you think that's possible? What's it like? How far are you away from the next weight class?
I believe I'm 6 pounds under the actual upper limit of the weight class. So honestly, I mean, it's bodybuilding, so I do want to improve. So I would love to slowly over time be able to crack that lightweight class and actually be a somewhat competitive, decent lightweight.
Yeah, you'd be obviously at the bottom of the class, but I mean, 6 pounds is not that far to go considering your what age are you 30, 31?
Turning 31 in December. So 30,
Yeah.
30.
Yeah. So if you compete as long as Jeff Alberts, you've got 20 more years to gain 6 pounds of muscle. And if you can't do that, you probably you need to change something up.
I need to reassess what I'm doing with my life, and
Yeah.
I need to pick up
Yeah.
another hobby.
Yeah. But by that time you'd be 50 anyway, so maybe fishing or something like that.
Billiards.
Yeah. I mean, so for the 2021 season, your goal would be to just repeat what you've done. I mean, do you think that you could realistically get those additional 6 pounds in that year or the year and a half that you've had off, or do you think that's like a more long-term goal?
I definitely think it's a more long-term goal. I did have a discussion with Cliff in regards to how I started out my contest prep, and he believes that I may have lost a bit of tissue being a bit too aggressive. So I think that I could potentially put on maybe 1 to 2 pounds of additional stage weight if I were to compete in 2021 with same conditioning.
What was your kind of approach to the last contest prep? I know you were working with Cliff Wilson. Was it like a higher carbohydrate approach with higher protein, or was there anything specific like that's kind of out of the ordinary or different than what you've experienced before?
Prior to Cliff, it was very high carb, low fat, high protein, very very aware of step count. And then when I started working with Cliff 6 weeks out from WNBF Worlds, it was completely different in regards to how I have previously dieted. He ended up bringing fat intake up, lowered carbs, reduced cardio and steps.
And did you continue to drop body weight, or was that the kind of why was specifically did he do that? Like, did he keep calories the same, or did he give you any reasonings why he was doing that? How did it impact your physique or your recovery?
calories were a bit lower. He was, since I believe he, just going off memory, I believe he said that I had around 3 to 4 pounds that we could pull off without running too flat or risking losing any more muscle. And reduced cardio mainly for fullness in the legs. And then fat intake was brought up in place of carbs due to, I believe his reasoning was for anxiety levels that he's noticed competitors have when they have such a low fat intake.
That's interesting. I'd actually never heard that before. So obviously you prepped pretty much yourself, but the whole way up to, if you only had 3 or 4 pounds to go, you prepped for yourself for all those other shows, right?
Yeah, and it was mainly just diet and brain fatigue, which was the main reason why I decided to hand the keys over to Cliff. I just didn't want to deal with making any of the decisions at that point in time anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, I saw some photos, I think maybe it was yesterday, from you from was it the WNBF Muscle Mania? Or I think that might have been, or sorry, not Muscle Mania, Universe, the one that you said Mackie had beat you. Yeah, that show.
Mr. Pro Universe.
Yeah, Pro Universe. That show, you were pretty, I mean, you weren't as lean as the Worlds, but you were still like very, very lean. If you only had 3, 4 pounds to go, you'd obviously done most of the work yourself. So what approach did you take to that? Was it just, like you said, high protein? Do you have more than a gram per pound of body weight? How's your carbs? Do you track your step count? What way did you kind of approach the overall prep?
Leading up to that show, it was very high carb because I was very, very pro performance, holding on to performance. But I did enter periods of digging or aggressive dieting where I would bring overall calories down a little bit. Step count was mainly from work. I was taking anywhere from around 15 to 25,000 steps. And then on top of that, kind of to continue digging, I immaturely would add cardio in to 3 times weekly.
That's a lot of it's a lot of activity. I remember, I don't know how you even dealt with 25,000 steps. I remember that when I was doing 20,000 a day at the end of my prep, I was just exhausted like every day. And it was from the activity, not just the diet, because the other day I walked a similar amount and I was just as exhausted nearly. So it's a lot of activity that you do every single day with that job. But I guess it just depends on your lifestyle. What kind of approach of weight loss were you like? Were you trying to hit a percentage every week, or like did you have a weight goal? How long did you actually prep for?
So at the start of the 2019 season, I did map out kind of like a blueprint game plan of goal weights for each month and the rate of loss. I didn't go with a percentage, mainly due to being a little bit heavier at the start, but I wanted to take off at least anywhere from 1.1 to 2 pounds per week at the initial starting point. And then after that, I reduced the amount of rate of loss per month as my body weight did decrease. And looking back on it, I was way too aggressive at the start. So I went from 180 to around 150, 155 very quick in around, I want to say 3 months max. And I ended up hanging out around stage condition for way too long of a time. And so I started to implement more diet breaks, more refeeds, just to offset any, negative adaptations that could occur. And I believe I ended up shooting myself in the foot in the long run because being, so close to stage weight for a long period of time.
What did you notice what kind of effect did you notice from being so lean for so long?
Just holding on to training performance was very, very, very difficult. And I started to notice sleep started to becoming a huge, huge, huge factor. I mean, I was sleeping maybe 2, 3, 4 hours max per night.
And do you think that, like, would you change anything? Because obviously you had a long competitive season, so you have to be in stage condition for your multiple shows. Do you think that was a bad idea or something that you would change in the future, or would you implement more kind of breaks in between or do less shows?
I think taking a either an aggressive approach at the start and then maintaining, or what I might potentially do in 2021 is line up my shows a little bit more close to one another. So I'm not competing in August, September, and then November.
Yeah, I think that's something that I would look at as well. It's unfortunate that the Worlds is like at the end of the year, but I guess it has to be that way because all the other shows are essentially qualifiers. But like for me, I would love to do the Muscle Mayhem again, but I don't know if I could like do a July show and then really bring my best in a November show, which kind of sucks. It would be better if it was like July and September or something like that, or the Mayhem show was like September or something like that. But that's just the way it is. I can only imagine people who do like April shows and and qualify for like what do you do? Like, do you take a? Do you? Yeah.
I don't know how people do that. I mean, it used to be, I guess, the cool thing to do, but just in regards to the physique that you're actually presenting, it just makes peaking that much more difficult, maintaining fullness. I mean, especially if you're, stage conditioned.
Yeah. So final question for you, Brett. What advice would you give to, say, people who are like looking to compete but are maybe like a little bit smaller? I don't mean smaller like height, but I know that when I was looking back in your pictures, like, or when I followed you back in the day on the forums, you were like a smaller bodybuilder. Even if you can still see some photos, like if you were to say like genetically blessed, like Alberto Nunez had a very good physique. He was fairly big up top from when he was younger, but it seems like you've actually come out on top in terms of, I know it's not really you're not really comparing yourself, but in terms of your accolades in bodybuilding, you're the only world champion out of all the people on the boards, as far as I'm aware. Maybe the few others had a log as well, but I'm pretty sure none of the others who are actually world champions ever had a bodybuilding.com forum log. So there's another kind of accolade to your collection.
That's weird to think of. I didn't even. Wow. I will always consider Berto up here in regards to human being, competitor. That was my role model growing up. So
yeah. So like, what advice would you have for like smaller bodybuilders or like people who are like, I'm not going to say you had like average genetics, because obviously you don't, but like, let's say like in your upper body, like you brought that up a lot from when you were younger, as you can see in the photos, etc. And people often get disheartened for thinking like, oh, I don't have genetics like, Maki or Babakar or Baba or whatever. So like, I'm not going to do there's no point to me even bodybuilding or competing, or like almost shooting themselves in the foot before they ever even start prepping. What's your advice for those people?
Realize why you're actually pursuing bodybuilding and understand that it is delayed gratification at its finest. And for smaller bodybuilders out there that are, dealing with subpar or maybe above average genetics like myself, I don't consider myself to be a genetic elite, but I wear my heart on my sleeve in regards to work ethic and just going into every session, giving it my all, and kind of just seeing the process over time when you do invest. But in regards to smaller framed individuals that might not be big, or say a bantamweight, I would heavily emphasize posing and being able to actually present your physique to its fullest, because at the end of the day, it's all an illusion. So my 145-pound frame up against a 180-pound person, I'm never going to win in sheer size, but I can create that, illusion that I might be a little bit bigger or more symmetrical. And then just surrounding yourself with bright-minded people.
Yeah, I think that's like posing is so important in terms of just your ability to show off what you have or potentially hide what you don't have. I think that goes a really long way in terms of like your return on investment in bodybuilding. It's just being able to pose properly.
Oh no, big time. And I can't thank Jeff Alberts enough to teaching me, how to pose and present myself as a smaller person.
Do you think that like as a smaller bodybuilder, like there's like differences that you should focus on versus bigger bodybuilders, like in terms of either posing or muscle parts or emphasizing certain things?
I think you definitely have to work with your structure, so to say, but I also believe that for a smaller individual, they might have to lean on conditioning a bit more as opposed to people that are more predisposed to being, genetically gifted in muscle.
Yeah, I mean, like Kendall, who won the WNBF Worlds, he wasn't like elite conditioning levels, but the guy just, his muscle bellies are just like Phil Heath-esque. So, there's only so much you can do and control yourself. If somebody if he got shredded, he would just never ever be beaten. But I guess it just depends on the individual. So yeah, thank you so much, man, for coming on. It's been really great to chat to you again. Hopefully we see you up on stage soon. I know the whole kind of situation going on over there is difficult, as well as like you got personal kind of things that you want to focus on first. But yeah, I really look forward to seeing you on stage again to defend your title, maybe 2021, and if not 2022, when we can perhaps compete at one of the same shows once again.
Thank you, man. No, definitely. Hope to see you again at future Worlds as well.
Yeah, me too. I don't know, man. I mean, the last Worlds, last year, it was so long that like, I don't know if I really enjoyed a bodybuilding show that long. It was like almost like 24 hours long. But where can people find you? Find out more information about you? What are you up to these days? Where can they find out like what you're doing? What's your social media profile, etc.?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is @BAFTUB, BAFTUB, and then for coaching service inquiries is @ATP Performance.
Awesome, man. And where did that name bathtub come from? It sounds like you're saying bathtub.
Funny story. So my original handle on the bodybuilding.com forums was Reflex, and I just so happened to always take pictures in my bathroom. And my initials are BAF, Brett Anthony Freeman, and bathtub.
Oh. So did somebody say to you you should call yourself bathtub, or did you come up with that yourself?
I think it was a combination of both, maybe. I'm not that smart. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's definitely the most unique story, I think, because I've heard of other ones like Jeff Alberts. His was just his name backwards. Like Paul Ravella was like his. I think it was like because he was from Florida and he's tall. His name is Paul. But your one's definitely unique because bathtub Brett. Anyway, dude, it was great to chat to you, and I look forward to chatting to you again.
Thank you, man. Me too. Thanks for having me on.